wasn't easy as I thought, until you really start diving in, to the stories.
At a recent event in Los Angeles, everything seemed normal until a fan asked Priscilla one deeply personal question about Elvis Presley. Suddenly, the room fell silent as Priscilla paused, her eyes filling with tears. What she said next shocked everyone present and revealed truths she had kept hidden for nearly 50 years. What did she finally admit? Breaking the ice. The hotel ballroom in Los Angeles filled with the murmur and whispers as journalists and Elvis fans settled into their seats. Camera crews positioned their equipment along the walls, while photographers checked their lenses one final time. The event had been arranged to celebrate the upcoming release of a documentary about Elvis Presley's life and career. Priscilla Presley sat at a table on the small stage, flanked by the documentary's director and producer. She wore a simple black dress and her signature elegant hairstyle. The room held about 200 people, all waiting for their chance to hear from the woman who knew Elvis better than almost anyone. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the rows of chairs. People clutched notebooks and recording devices, ready to capture every word. The air conditioning hummed in the background, barely audible over the buzz of anticipation. Tables along the side wall displayed promotional materials for the documentary, including posters featuring rare photographs of Elvis from his early career. The organizers had set up a professional sound system, and technicians made final adjustments to the microphones. Everything was well arranged to project professionalism. The format allowed for audience questions after the first presentation. Several people had already asked about the documentary's new footage and rare photographs. Priscilla answered each question with grace, smiling at appropriate moments and giving insights into Elvis's personality. She had done hundreds of these events over the years. Her responses flowed smoothly as she discussed her role in preserving his legacy and ensuring new generations could appreciate his contributions to music. The atmosphere stayed professional and predictable. Nobody expected what was about to happen next. A woman in her 60s stood up near the back of the room. She held the microphone with slightly trembling hands. Her voice cracked as she explained that she had been an Elvis fan since childhood. She attended his concerts and collected his records for decades. Then she paused, gathering courage for what came next. She wanted to know something personal, something that went beyond the usual questions about fame and music. She asked Priscilla if she ever regretted the years she spent with Elvis, considering how difficult their relationship had been at times. The question hung in the air like something fragile and dangerous. The room went completely silent. Even the camera operator seemed to freeze in place. This was not the kind of question typically asked at such events. The producer shifted uncomfortably in his seat, crossing and uncrossing his legs. Several audience members exchanged glances, unsure whether the question crossed a line. A few people held their breath, waiting to see how Priscilla would handle this moment. The woman who asked the question kept standing, her face flushed with emotion and perhaps embarrassment at her own boldness. And the silence stretched longer than anyone felt comfortable with. Priscilla's smile faded slowly. She looked down at her hands folded on the table in front of her. The seconds stretched out as everyone waited. Someone coughed nervously from the middle of the room. A chair creaked as someone shifted their weight. The photographers lowered their cameras, sensing that this unexpected moment required something different than the usual promotional shots. Priscilla raised her head and looked directly at the woman who had asked the question. Her expression had changed completely from the pleasant public face she had worn moments earlier. Her eyes glistened with moisture that had not been there before. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. The pause extended beyond comfortable silence into something heavier and more painful. The director leaned slightly toward her, perhaps ready to intervene if needed or to redirect the conversation to safer territory. But Priscilla raised one hand gently, a small gesture indicating she would answer. She took a breath that everyone in the front rows could hear, a deep inhale that signaled something important was coming. What she said next would echo through the room and eventually across social media and entertainment news outlets around the world. Her voice came out softer than it had been all evening. She spoke about truth rather than legacy, about reality rather than the carefully constructed narrative that had surrounded her life for decades. She addressed the complexity of loving someone who belonged to millions of people while trying to build a private life. She talked about the weight of being young and swept into a world she could never have imagined or prepared for adequately. The answer went places nobody anticipated. It revealed layers of emotion that decades of careful public appearances had kept hidden beneath the surface. The journalists stopped taking notes and simply listened, their pens stuck above their notebooks. The fans who had come hoping for cheerful memories about the king of rock and roll found themselves witnessing something far more human. One woman in the third row wiped tears from her cheeks. A man near the front leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, completely absorbed in what he was hearing. Priscilla continued speaking without interruption. She did not sugarcoat the difficulties or pretend everything had been perfect and wonderful. She acknowledged pain alongside joy, regret alongside gratitude, loss alongside love. Her honesty cut through the usual cliché that surrounds conversations about beloved celebrities who have passed away. The woman who asked the question sat back down slowly, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking. Others in the audience wiped their eyes or stared at Priscilla with expressions of surprise and recognition of what she had said. Priscilla's unexpected response. Priscilla's answer began with an admission that caught everyone completely off guard. She said that yes, there were moments when she wondered what her life might have been if she had never met Elvis Presley. The confession hung in the air like something forbidden that should not be spoken aloud. Fans had always assumed she cherished every moment with him without qualification or doubt. An idea that their relationship was something magical and enviable. Now she was acknowledging doubts and alternative paths, roads not taken that sometimes haunted her thoughts. She explained that being 14 years old and meeting a world-famous entertainer changed the entire trajectory of her existence in ways she could never reverse. Her life split into before and after that moment in Germany. The before version was a normal teenage girl with ordinary dreams and possibilities. The after version became someone else entirely, shaped by forces beyond her control. She never got to find out who that first girl might have become, because Elvis entered her life and redirected everything. That loss of potential selves was something she had thought about more as she aged. She described feeling like two different people sometimes, living parallel lives that never quite aligned. One version of herself existed in the public eye as Elvis Presley's former wife and the guardian of his legacy. That particular Priscilla attended events like this one, gave interviews to magazines and television shows, and maintained the constructed image that millions of fans wanted and needed to see. She smiled on cue, shared approved stories, and protected the mythology that surrounded Elvis. That public Priscilla knew her role and performed it well. The other version was simply a woman who had loved and lost, who had raised a daughter largely alone, who had built her own career while always being defined by someone else first. That private Priscilla had feelings and thoughts that did not fit the public story. She had moments of anger and resentment mixed with love and appreciation. She had complicated emotions about a complicated man and a complicated relationship. She rarely talked about this second version because people did not want to hear about it. They wanted the fairy tale, not the messy reality. Her voice remained steady as she talked about the isolation that came with being Elvis's partner. She mentioned the years spent waiting for him while he traveled and performed and lived a life she could only partially access. She spoke about the unique pressure of loving someone whose image belonged to the world in ways that transcended normal relationships. Every private moment carried the weight of public expectation and scrutiny. Every argument or disagreement happened against the backdrop of his wide fame and the constant presence of employees and friends. She could never simply be a young wife figuring out marriage through normal trial and error. She had to navigate being married to an icon while still growing up herself, still discovering who she was and what she wanted. The normal challenges of marriage were amplified by fame, wealth, and the constant intrusion of outside forces. She felt watched all the time, even in her own home. Privacy was a luxury they never really had, not in the way regular couples did. Graceland was always full of people, day and night. Priscilla revealed that the hardest part was not the ending of their marriage, but the years of pretending everything was fine when it was not. She described smiling for cameras and public appearances while feeling increasingly distant from the man she married. The disconnect grew slowly over time, like a crack in a foundation that spreads so gradually you do not notice until the damage is significant. She talked about watching Elvis struggle with his own demons while feeling powerless to help him, unable to reach him through the walls he built. The prescription pill use, the erratic behavior, the growing disconnect between them created a sadness that no amount of wealth or fame could fix or compensate for. She had carried that sadness for decades, through years and years of public appearances and interviews. She rarely spoke about it honestly in public forums because doing so felt like betrayal. People wanted her to celebrate Elvis Presley, not talk about the pain. But the question had opened a door, and she was tired of keeping it closed. The response took an unexpected turn when she discussed the guilt she felt after his demise in 1977. She wondered if she could have done something differently, said something that might have changed his path or altered the outcome. If she had stayed, if she had tried harder, if she had found the right words at the right moment, could things have ended differently? She knew logically that one person cannot save another from themselves, that addiction and self-destruction follow their own logic, but emotions do not follow logic or reason. Priscilla had spent years in that uncomfortable space between knowing she made the right choice to leave and wondering if staying might have altered history. The therapy she had helped her process these complex and contradictory feelings, but they never entirely disappeared or resolved. They lived with her still, decades later. Grief and guilt had become permanent residents in her emotional landscape. She acknowledged that her answer might disappoint people who loved the romance and the legend, the idea of perfect love cut short by tragedy. But the question had asked for truth, and she felt tired of avoiding it and protecting everyone from reality. She was now in her late 70s, approaching 80. Time was making her less concerned about maintaining perfect images and more interested in being honest about her experiences before the opportunity passed forever. The weight of protecting a legend for nearly 50 years was heavy, heavier than most people could imagine. Sometimes she just wanted to be seen as a real person who lived through complicated circumstances rather than a character in someone else's story. The context of Elvis and Priscilla's relationship. Priscilla first saw Elvis Presley at a party in Germany when she was just 14 years old. He was 24 and serving in the United States Army, stationed overseas like thousands of other young American men. The age gap would raise serious concerns today, but in 1959, the situation unfolded differently under different social norms. Her stepfather was also stationed in Germany with the military, and the community of American service members and their families was relatively small and interconnected. Elvis noticed her immediately at the gathering. She was beautiful and young, with dark hair and striking features. He was lonely and far from home, missing the life he had left behind in America. The connection formed quickly despite their age difference and the unusual circumstances of their meeting. Elvis was already one of the most famous entertainers in the world, but military service had temporarily removed him from that world. In Germany, he was just another soldier, though everyone certainly knew who he was. Their courtship happened mostly in group settings at first, with Elvis's friends and fellow soldiers often present. Priscilla's parents allowed the relationship to continue under supervision, though they must have had concerns about their young daughter attracting the attention of a famous older man. Elvis presented himself as respectful and serious about his intentions. He called her parents regularly and asked permission before taking her anywhere. He promised to take care of her and treat her properly, to be a gentleman despite his reputation as a rock and roll rebel. When Elvis returned to America after his military service ended, Priscilla stayed in Germany and finished her education. They maintained their relationship through letters and long phone calls, running up huge bills. Elvis wrote about missing her and wanting her near him, about how life in Memphis felt empty without her presence. He eventually convinced her parents to let her move to Memphis to be closer to him. She would live with his family at Graceland while completing high school in the city. Her parents agreed to this highly unusual arrangement, trusting Elvis's promises and perhaps unable to resist the pressure. Priscilla moved into the world's most famous mansion at 16 years old, leaving her family and everything familiar behind. She attended an all-girls Catholic school during the day, wearing her uniform and sitting in classes with other teenagers. Then she returned to Graceland each afternoon, entering a completely different world. Life at Graceland was unlike anything she had known in her previous ordinary existence. Elvis kept unusual hours, often sleeping during the day and staying awake all night. His friends and employees filled the house at all times, creating constant activity and noise. Privacy was rare and valuable in that environment. Priscilla adapted to his schedule and his preferences, changing herself to fit into his world. He chose her clothes and her hairstyle, deciding how she should look and present herself. He wanted her to look a certain way, to be a certain type of woman that matched his vision and desires. She was young enough and infatuated enough to let him shape her into his ideal. She became what he wanted rather than discovering who she might have been on her own if left to develop naturally. Their relationship remained chaste for years, despite living under the same roof, sharing the same space daily. Elvis had particular ideas about purity and marriage, about how a good girl should behave. He treated her like something precious that needed protection and preservation until the proper time. This restraint was part of his control over the relationship, another way he decided the terms of everything. Priscilla waited and adapted and hoped, learning the patience that would define much of their time together. She watched him leave for movie shoots in Hollywood and concerts around the country. She heard rumors about his behavior with other women, whispers that reached her even in Memphis. She learned to not ask too many questions, to accept what he chose to tell her and ignore the rest. This willful blindness became another survival skill. On May 1st in 1967, they finally got married in Las Vegas. Priscilla was 21 years old, finally old enough to make her own legal decisions, though she had been living in his world for years already. The wedding was small and rushed, arranged quickly at a hotel with little planning or ceremony. Most of Elvis's inner circle attended, but it was not the grand ceremony many people expected for such a famous couple. They had their honeymoon briefly before Elvis returned to work, unable to take significant time away from his career obligations. Priscilla moved fully into the role of wife to the biggest star in the world. She had spent years preparing for this position, molding herself to fit his expectations and needs. Now she had to actually live it daily and discover what that meant. Their daughter, Lisa Marie, was born exactly 9 months after the wedding in February 1968. Priscilla poured her energy into motherhood while Elvis continued his work schedule. He made movies in Hollywood and performed in Las Vegas and toured constantly around the country. Priscilla stayed home with the baby, managing the household and waiting for his returns. The isolation grew heavier with time. She was trapped in a mansion with everything money could buy, but lacking the companionship and partnership she craved. Life after Elvis. The news of Elvis's demise reached Priscilla on August 16th in 1977. She immediately flew to Memphis with 9-year-old Lisa Marie, rushing to be there despite their divorce 4 years earlier. The grief was complicated by their separation and the years of distance that had grown between them. She had to mourn privately while managing public expectations and the massive media attention. The performance of grief added another layer to the actual feeling of loss that consumed her. Priscilla was 32 years old and suddenly defined even more by her connection to a deceased legend rather than a living person. Graceland faced serious financial problems after Elvis passed away that most fans never knew about. His estate was worth less than people assumed, depleted by years of excessive spending. The property taxes alone threatened to force the sale of the mansion and grounds. Priscilla stepped into a business role nobody expected her to fill, a role she had never trained for or imagined taking. She worked with financial advisors to understand the complicated situation and the limited options available. She made the bold decision to open Graceland to public tours, transforming the private home into a museum. Many people thought tourists would not pay money to visit a deceased singer's home, that the idea was strange or disrespectful. Priscilla trusted her instinct and moved forward with the plan, despite the doubters and critics. The decision to open Graceland as a museum proved brilliant and financially successful, beyond initial projections. Thousands of fans wanted to walk through the rooms where Elvis lived, to see his personal spaces and belongings. The admission fees generated steady income that stabilized the estate's finances. Priscilla oversaw the careful preservation of the property, while making it accessible to visitors from around the world. She understood that Elvis's legacy needed to remain alive in popular culture to maintain its value and relevance. She managed licensing deals for his image and music, protecting the estate from exploitation while maximizing its commercial potential. Her business acumen surprised people who had seen her only as Elvis's pretty young wife, underestimating her intelligence and capability. Priscilla negotiated contracts and made strategic decisions about the estate with confidence and skill. She served as executor and ensured Lisa Marie would inherit substantial wealth when she came of age. She was able to transform a financial crisis into a thriving enterprise through smart management. Graceland became one of the most visited private homes in America, attracting hundreds of thousands of tourists annually. The estate's value grew into hundreds of millions of dollars over the decades. She had saved Elvis's legacy through business skills nobody knew she possessed. Priscilla also pursued her own career, separate from Elvis's shadow and influence. She took acting lessons seriously and landed roles in movies and television shows. Her most notable role was in the Naked Gun comedy films, where she showed an unexpected talent for humor and timing. She also appeared in the television series Dallas during its popular run in the 80s. Critics sometimes dismissed her as famous only because of Elvis, but she worked steadily and improved her craft with dedication. She proved she could build her own professional identity beyond being the former wife of a legend. After Elvis, Priscilla's personal life included other relationships, though she approached them carefully. She dated a few men seriously and had a long relationship with a businessman that lasted years. She never remarried, though she certainly had opportunities and proposals. Perhaps the experience of being married to Elvis made the idea of legal commitment unnecessary. She valued her independence and the life she built on her own terms, answering to nobody. She focused on raising Lisa Marie and managing the estate and developing her career in entertainment. Romance remained part of her life, but never again defined it or consumed her identity. The relationship with Lisa Marie was central to everything Priscilla did and every decision she made. She tried to give her daughter stability and normalcy, despite the impossible circumstances of being Elvis Presley's only child. Lisa Marie struggled with the weight of her father's legacy and her own identity, never quite finding solid ground. She turned to illegal substances and had unstable relationships and struggled with the same demons that had haunted her father. Priscilla watched her daughter repeat some of the same painful patterns, unable to stop the cycle despite her best efforts. Priscilla tried to help while respecting Lisa Marie's autonomy as an adult, a difficult balance to maintain. The bond between them was strong, but complicated by shared trauma and loss. Priscilla also became a grandmother and found joy in that role when Lisa Marie had children. She stayed involved in their lives, providing presence and support. She tried to provide the stability she had worked so hard to maintain for Lisa Marie. The family dynamics were complex, but Priscilla held the family together through multiple tragedies, becoming the matriarch who carried not just Elvis's legacy, but the entire family's story and pain. The impact of memory. Elvis Presley passed away nearly 50 years ago, yet his presence in popular culture remains remarkably powerful and widespread. New generations discover his music through movies and television shows that feature his songs. His image appears on merchandise sold around the world, from coffee mugs to clothing. Impersonators make entire careers out of copying his style and sound, performing at events and casinos. The fascination with Elvis extends beyond his music to his entire life story and personality. People want to understand the man behind the legend. Priscilla represents the closest connection to that private Elvis that most people will ever access or experience. She knew Elvis before the world consumed him totally, when he was still somewhat human and reachable. She saw him vulnerable and human, not just the confident performer the public knew. She experienced his love and his limitations, his generosity and his selfishness. She carries memories and insights that exist nowhere else, that went with the other people who knew him intimately. When she speaks about Elvis, people listen. She has authority that comes from intimate knowledge, from lived experience rather than research. Her perspective shapes how the world understands the man who changed popular music forever and influenced the generations. Priscilla's recent honest answer about regret and complexity adds important depth to the Elvis story that has been missing. It challenges the simplified narratives that reduce real people to legends and myths. Fans sometimes resist this complexity because they want their heroes pure and uncomplicated, easy to admire without reservation. They want the romance to be perfect and the ending to be tragic but beautiful in its tragedy. She introduces doubt and pain and difficulty into a tale people thought they knew and understood. This disruption serves an important purpose by reminding everyone that legends were people first, flawed and fickle. Priscilla's answer reflected the collision between myth and reality, between story and truth. Everyone present had to reconcile the Elvis they imagined with the relationship Priscilla actually described and lived. They had to accept that love stories can be both delicate and damaging, both beautiful and painful. They had to understand that you can cherish memories while also acknowledging their cost and their complications. Priscilla gave them permission to hold contradictory truths simultaneously without needing to choose one version. She modeled a more mature and honest way of thinking about celebrity relationships and personal history. Her willingness to speak truthfully at this stage of her life matters for broader conversations about women and fame and power. Priscilla spent decades serving Elvis's image and protecting his legacy from criticism or tarnish. She sacrificed her own story to maintain his, putting his reputation above her own truth. Many women in similar positions never tell their versions. They go with their truths untold, because speaking honestly feels like betrayal of someone they loved. Priscilla chose differently in that moment. She decided that honesty honors both herself and Elvis more than continued myth-making and protection. She trusted that his legacy could withstand the truth about their relationship, that it was strong enough to survive complexity. The moment also reveals changing attitudes about age and relevance in society. Priscilla is approaching 80 years old, an age when many people are ignored. Society often treats older women as irrelevant or out of touch, no longer worth listening to seriously. Yet her words commanded complete attention from a room full of people across all age groups and backgrounds. Her life experience gave her perspective worth hearing and considering. Her vulnerability created connections that polished public relations statements never could achieve. She demonstrated that people have valuable truths to share when given space and respect to share them openly. The impact of her answer will extend beyond that single afternoon in Los Angeles. The media will analyze her words for weeks and months, debating their meaning and significance. Fan communities will debate what she meant and whether she should have said it publicly. Some will criticize her harshly for tarnishing Elvis's memory with complaints and regrets. Others will appreciate her honesty and courage in speaking difficult truths. The conversation itself matters more than any consensus or agreement. Priscilla stirred genuine dialogue about love, loss, fame, and the price of legend. She made people think critically rather than just consume another story about a lifeless celebrity. Future biographers and historians will reference this moment in their work and analysis. Priscilla's candid admission would become evidence that the Elvis story contains more complexity than previous accounts suggested or acknowledged. Her words would be used to explore the human cost of fame and the challenges of relationships under extraordinary circumstances. Her honesty becomes part of the permanent historical record, changing what we know. It changes how we understand one of the 20th century's most famous and influential figures. Priscilla has shown that memory can honor both the joy and the pain without diminishing either experience.